Well, hello and welcome to this English lesson about computers. This is part two. I did a part one. I did a lesson on computers, I think last spring. So if you do want to watch that first, or if you want to watch that later, that's probably good review as well. But in this English lesson about computers, I went through I did a little bit of research and I tried to find as many verbs as possible that we use when talking about the computer. There's a few nouns thrown in as well. It isn't a perfect list of English verbs that we use when talking about computers, but I certainly found a lot of them, and I was surprised because I thought we only had one, but we actually have many verbs, many English verbs we use when talking about computers. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll get started in just a moment on this English lesson about computers. So the general term we use when talking about the computer is that you use a computer. Maybe you're doing some research and you're going to use your computer. Maybe you have to type something up, you might use your computer. Maybe you just want to check your email. So you might find your computer and use your computer to check your email. If you share a computer, you might have questions like this in your house. Are you using the computer tonight? Because I need to use the computer as well. So if you have that situation, maybe you're talking about who gets to use the computer. So this is the general term, the general verb we would use when talking about computers. We would say that you use them. The English verb to use is very useful. I just used the verb to talk about. Anyways, it's a useful verb. Use is a useful verb. Now, when we talk about kids, there's a couple different ways we talk about computers. Sometimes kids play on the computer. So if you have children or nephews or nieces, or maybe you run into kids because you're a teacher, they might say things like, "Can I play on the computer this afternoon?" My kids always say, "What time can I play on the computer?" We've set rules in our house that our kids can only play on the computer at certain times of the day. And we sometimes call it computer time. Although they aren't always just on the computer. Sometimes they use their phones or they're playing on a video game console as well. We also use the word, I just thought of this, we also say go on. Sometimes we say we let our kids go on the computer for a couple of hours each day. Or our kids might say, "Can I go on the computer tonight? I need to use it for school." So use and play on and to go on the computer, all general terms for using the computer. Sometimes the computer will crash. When the computer crashes, it is not a very nice thing. You can even see in this slide, they've put like the emoji for a sad face, and it says your PC ran into a problem and needs to restart. That is never a nice thing to have, especially when you're doing something important. So you might end up saying to your boss, "I didn't get the work done last night because my computer crashed." Or you might say to someone, "I was working on my computer yesterday and it was so frustrating because it kept crashing." So when a computer crashes, I think we all know what this means. It stops what it's doing and it gives you an error message on the screen. Sometimes computers freeze, or you would say your computer is frozen. So you could also say to your boss, "I couldn't get my work done last night because my computer kept freezing." Or you could call tech support and say, "I'm having trouble, my computer is frozen." So even though freeze and frozen is usually used to refer to when the temperature goes below zero, we also use it to talk about a computer that won't do anything. If you hit keys on the keyboard, nothing happens. If you click your mouse, nothing happens. You would then say, "My computer has frozen," or "My computer is frozen." And then you'll need to do this. You'll need to reboot your computer. When your computer is on and you tell your computer to turn off and turn back on again right away, that is called rebooting. We also sometimes call it restarting. A lot of times when my computer starts acting strange, if I get error messages, if my computer crashes, I most often reboot my computer. I usually decide that, now is a good time to turn my computer off and turn it back on again right away. And that process is called rebooting. When you have to reboot your computer, several times every day, it might mean that there's something really wrong with your computer. I usually only reboot my computer every once in a while. It's not a very common thing. You might have something called a virus, and I'm going to talk about malware in a bit. I should have put these slides in a different order, but that's okay. A virus is something that infects your computer the same way a virus infects the human body. There are viruses that infect computers. So a virus is a piece of software that someone has written, and its goal is to get onto your computer and then to spread itself to other computers. A virus is never a nice thing to have on your computer. So often you will install antivirus software. So antivirus software is a different piece of software which tries to get rid of viruses on your computer. So let me go to the malware slide though. Malware is the general term for any piece of software that was written to do bad things to your computer. Viruses are malware. Spyware would be malware. Spyware is software that spies on you. Maybe it checks what your keystrokes are, or it takes information from your computer or monitors what you're doing. So malware is not a nice thing to have on your computer. And when you have a virus or you have some sort of malware on your computer, it can cause your computer to freeze or crash. Sometimes that is the reason that that happens. I think we're all familiar with this word, spam. When you have an email address, you get emails from people who you want to get emails from, but you also get a lot of emails from people who you don't know and who try to sell you things. I get a lot of spam in my inbox. I get a lot of spam email that I don't want, especially around this time of year as Christmas approaches. I seem to be getting more and more spam in my inbox, a lot more spam email, as people try to convince me that I should buy things. I just delete spam. I also have a spam filter, which puts email that the computer knows is spam. It automatically puts it into a separate folder for me. That's very handy to have a spam filter. We also have all run into this. It's called a Captcha. So a Captcha is when you're signing up for something on a website or you're trying to log in somewhere and the website wants you to prove that you are a human. The website wants you to prove that you're not a piece of software. And so there are a lot of different varieties of Captcha. A Captcha, again, is kind of like a little test that only a human being can pass. So this one, you have to check off, I am not a robot. You've probably seen the Captcha where you have to click on all the photos where there's a boat, or it will say, click on all the photos where there is a bus. That is another form of Captcha as well. Just a way to make sure that the person using the website is actually a person and not some kind of software. We don't use this term as much, but we have something called the cloud. A lot of things are saved in the cloud. All of my YouTube videos are in the cloud. When you use something like Google Drive, so Google Docs or Google Sheets, all of that information is stored somewhere on the internet on a computer. It's not stored on the computer in front of you. So you can have things stored locally, but you can also have information stored on the cloud. Maybe you've used Google Drive, maybe you've used Dropbox. There are a number of different ways that you can put things onto the internet, and we would say that it is then stored in the cloud. When there is something on the internet and you want to put it on your computer, we usually say that you will download it. When you buy a new game online, you have to download the game before you can play it. When you buy a piece of software, it used to come on a CD or DVD, but now you will often download the software. If you bought Microsoft Office, you would go online and you would pay for the software and then you would download it. So the software would come from the internet onto your computer. The other direction is called an upload. When I make a new video, I edit the video on my computer and then I upload the video to YouTube. So the video or the information on my computer goes from my computer to a place on the internet. So again, download is when you get something from the internet, and upload is when you put something on the internet, different direction. So let's talk a little bit about the mouse. I thought this was kind of funny because I think everyone knows about this, but then I thought some people just use their trackpad, and I forgot to mention it. Usually with the mouse, you can either click once, or sometimes you double click or click twice. So it's very common for people to say things like this: click on that icon. Click on that icon and drag it. So when you click on something, you can then drag it on your computer screen. So you might click something and drag it to the recycle bin, or you might drag it to the trash can. So if you wanted to get rid of it or delete it, you would click and then you would drag. If you, though, wanted to use something, you might need to double click on it. On certain computer systems, you need to double click on something and then it will run. On my computer, if I want to use a piece of software that's on my desktop, I will click twice really fast. I will double click. Sometimes you might even right click. Now this depends on what kind of operating system you're using, but when you right click on something on the desktop, sometimes a menu will pop up. So you usually use the left mouse button to do things, and the right mouse button usually brings up a small menu where you can make other choices and do things. You can do things like copy things. When you click copy, whatever you have clicked on or whatever you have highlighted, the computer remembers, okay? It basically memorizes it so that you can do something with it later, which is called paste. Copy and paste is very, very handy, very useful when you're learning a language. If you were to listen to a new English song, you could find the lyrics on the internet and you could highlight the lyrics. So you click and drag over them. Then you right click and copy them, and then you could paste them into a document and you could then work with it. Like you could translate some of the words and write the word in your language beside it. But copy and paste is very, very handy. There's also something called cut. It works the same as copy, but when you cut something, it doesn't just memorize it, it actually disappears from the screen, and then you can still go and paste it later. So basically, copy and paste makes two copies of something. Cut and paste takes something from one spot and puts it somewhere else. I think you knew this, but maybe you didn't know the verbs. And then I want to mention as well that when you copy something, it's Control-C or Command-C if you're on a Mac, and paste is Control-V or Command-V if you're on a Mac. I think Eugene is putting that in the chat right now. Control-C, I think it's Control-V actually. I think Control-P might be an old way to print. Not sure, but I use Control-C and Control-V, or Command-C and Command-V. So you know what Google is. Many of you use Google as your search engine, but it's also a verb in English. You can Google something. You can say to someone, how do you change a tire on a vehicle? And you could respond by saying, I don't know, why don't you Google it? So we don't say, why don't you go on Google and look it up? We literally say, why don't you Google it? What kind of squirrels live in Canada? I don't know, why don't you Google it? I'm going to Google it and find out. So we often do this in English where when a new term is invented, we might immediately make a verb out of it. So if you don't know a lot about computers, you can Google it. You can go on Google and you can type it in and click Google search and it will find the answer. You can Google it. I think Google is expecting it to be Christmas soon. I didn't realize this when I got the image yesterday, but there are Christmas lights on the word Google. So when you are looking at anything on a computer, you can scroll down and you can scroll back up. So often in class, I might say to a student, well, let me see the project you're working on, and I'll read what's on the screen, and then I'll say, okay, scroll down a bit so I can read the rest. So that basically means to move down in a document or move down on a web page. Often you will use the wheel on the mouse to scroll down, okay? When you move the wheel, it will move the screen down. And then of course, we also have scroll up. So I might say to a student, scroll up to the beginning of your paper so I can read your first paragraph, or scroll down to the end of your paper, or scroll down to the bottom of this web page so we can read what's there. So scroll down takes you to the bottom, and then scroll up takes you back to the top. You might still want to print. This doesn't happen very often anymore. In schools, often everything is digital. We use something called Google Classroom. So I give students assignments on the computer, and they finish them on the computer and return them on the computer. But sometimes people still want to print things. You realized from watching my other channel that I still print one piece of paper every day. I click File Print on my computer, or I click the little print icon, and it will create whatever's on my screen. It will put it on a piece of paper. So we still print, and we use it as a verb. I need to print something. I need to print something for class today. I need to print something for my meeting later today. So we were supposed to use less paper by now in the world, but I think we're still using quite a bit of it. Hey, this is an older verb that we don't use very much anymore. And there's another one that's even older. Sometimes people will browse the internet. I haven't heard this word for a long time. A lot of times people will just say, I was on the internet the other day and I read something, or later today I have a bit of time, I'm just going to go on the internet and do some research. But we used to say browse. People would browse the internet, and that's why we call them web browsers. So you use a browser to browse the internet. A long time ago, people used to surf the internet. I have not heard that word used to talk about the internet for a very long time, but people used to surf the web. I was surfing the web, so haven't heard that for probably 10 or more years, maybe 20 years. Browse, you'll still hear once in a while. When you don't want something anymore, you delete it. You can either put it in the trash can or the recycle bin. When you don't want something, as I said earlier, you can click on it, a single click, and then drag it. And then when you let go, it goes in the recycle bin. I don't delete things permanently when I delete them on my computer. I usually put them in the recycle bin, and then every month or so, I look at what's in there before I empty it and delete things permanently. Sometimes when you put something in the recycle bin and you did it by accident, you might want to restore that file. Not sure if you can see this, but you can open your recycle bin or open your trash can on a computer, and you can restore a file. So that takes it back out of the recycle bin. Sometimes you put things in there by accident. And then Mode Eggs was talking about this. You should always save your work. When you are typing a document, if you're using a piece of software, you should save it. If you're working on editing a photo, you should save it. You should hit Control S, or you should hit File Save as often as possible so that you don't lose your work. You don't want to lose your work. This to me is one of the most powerful things in the computer world, and it's called undo. So if you hit the undo button, which looks like an arrow, or if you hit Control Z or Command Z on a Mac, it undoes what you just did. So if you delete something in a document, you can hit undo. If you are editing a video and you accidentally delete part of it, you can hit undo, Control Z, or you can click the undo button. Undo has really saved me a number of times from disaster, where I've made a mistake editing a video, and then I can just hit undo and it puts it back to where it was before. You also have redo. When you undo something, and if you're like, no, I did actually want to do that, you can redo it. So that's kind of handy as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about upgrade and update. Sometimes you need to upgrade something on your computer, and sometimes you need to update something on your computer. And these words look very similar, but here's how I would distinguish between the two. Let's say you're using Windows 10. You might want to upgrade and start using Windows 11. Let's say you have an old computer and you want to get a better one. You might want to upgrade to a better computer. So for me, upgrade is a major change in a piece of software or a major change in what you own. To me, an update is something that's a little more minor. If you do your Windows updates, it means your computer makes little changes to make your system better. If you want to update your graphics card, it might mean you put a new graphics card in. So for me, I would use the word upgrade for major changes, and I would use the word update for small changes. That being said, you'll probably hear these two words mixed up once in a while. People will say, I really need to update my computer. And that might mean they want to buy a new one, but I would use the word upgrade. So for you, I would say this, because I've worked with computers. I would use upgrade to talk about major changes and update to talk about minor changes. Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe Dave and Todd can give their opinion on that in the chat. Let's see here. When you get software, I've used this word a couple times already. When you get software, sometimes you download the software and then you need to install the software. When you install software, it takes it from whatever version you got from the internet and it makes it usable on your computer. It's similar to when you need windows in your house. The truck delivers the windows and sets them by a tree. That's like getting it downloaded, but you still need to install the window in your house. So the same thing happens with software. When you download a file, you have the file, but it's not really usable yet. You still have to double click and install it. So kind of picture it that way. Downloading is like a truck delivering windows to your house, and then you still have to install them. Hack. So when you hack a computer, it means you break into it. You bypass the security. When you hack a computer, it means you use someone else's computer without their permission, and it's basically breaking the law. So someone who hacks computers is called a hacker. Sometimes people hack computers because they want to get information from someone or they want to install some malware. Not very nice when someone hacks your computer. And someone asked a question earlier about backup. So first of all, I want to mention this. When you back up your computer, it's usually two words, but the resulting thing that you create is called a backup, which is one word, okay? But you'll see this kind of used in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes people say, I have to back up my computer, and they make it one word. But technically, the verb backup is two words. I need to back up my computer, and then I need to create a backup. When it's the noun, it becomes one word. So what is a backup? You get an external hard drive, and you put all the files from your computer on that other hard drive. Or you put all the files from your computer onto the internet somewhere, and you create a cloud backup. So a couple different kinds of ways to back up. Sometimes your computer just doesn't work and it crashes all the time. It freezes all the time. You don't know what's wrong with it, so you decide you're going to wipe your computer. When you wipe a computer, it means that you delete everything on it and you restore it to what it was like the day you bought it, okay? So often at work, after 6 years of using my laptop, I'm allowed to take it home. But before I take it home, the school will wipe the laptop. So they'll delete everything that's on it. They'll make the laptop basically exactly how it was when it first came out of the box, with nothing on it except for the operating system. So when you wipe a computer, it means you delete everything. You'll sometimes see this on TV or in the movies when criminals have information on a computer they don't want the police to have. They'll quickly wipe the computer when the police are coming. They'll wipe all of the data so that there's nothing on the computer for the police to see.